War and Peace, Middlemarch, Catch-22, Love Me, Fierce and Danger. These are all classic works of literature, enduring masterpieces which you should definitely read. And today on Ellroy Reads we'll be looking at another classic work of literature, The Adventures of Augie March by Saul Bellow. Yes, welcome back to Ellroy Reads. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Ellroy Reads is a show where every week I look at a book that was highly influential into the life of James Ellroy, an influence on his work, on his life, on his thinking. And most of the books we've covered have been naturally crime novels, as Ellroy is the great LA crime writer. And the Adventures of Augie March is different because it's high literature, I suppose. It's canonical. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Saul Bellow, a little bit about the novel, and then get to how it influenced Ellroy. You may find it, even if you're an ardent James Ellroy fan who knows a lot about him, you may find it surprises you. Okay, so Saul Bellow was born in Quebec in 1915. His parents had emigrated from St. Petersburg 2 years prior. They'd kind of done the immigrant experience in reverse because in St. Petersburg they'd had servants, they'd been upper middle class Lithuanian Jews. But when they found themselves in Canada, they were reduced to the Tsarist regime was persecuting a lot of Russian Jews. In Canada, they found themselves reduced to menial work, cleaning and manual work. So there was this great sense of loss hanging over the family, and Bellow was brought up in all of this. Nevertheless, he was an ambitious upcoming man. He was educated at Northwestern and two other major universities. He did a variety of odd jobs before he found one of his the most influential times in his life was that when America entered World War II, he joined the Merchant Marine, and it was in the Merchant Navy that he wrote his first novel, Dangling Man. And The Adventures of Augie March was his third novel, by which time he was becoming much more established. He won the National Book Award, and he would go on to a fabulous career in academia and to become one of the most celebrated literary figures of his time. So, plot-wise, it's really a succession of episodes. It is a picaresque novel. It's Bildungsroman, in that the titular character, Augie March, is he's from this family. There's an absent father. Which is very much like Bellow's life, although the book is actually dedicated to his father. And there's this irony. He's got two brothers. One brother, Georgie, is mentally deficient. There's different language used at the time, but he's something of the idiot boy of the family. And he has this series of adventures. He falls in love. He's rather foolish in love. He's also a bit of a skirt chaser. One of his lovers takes him to Mexico, where she tries to capture lizards with an eagle. It's all very funny. It's all very kind of bizarre, full of observation about human nature and the absurdity of it all. He joins the Merchant Navy, and the final episode, or the penultimate episode, I should say, his ship is sunk, and he spends an interminable amount of time in a lifeboat with this lunatic character. And this reminded me very much. I was talking recently to Daniel Wiseman, who wrote Cinnamon Girl and The Last Songbird, a fabulous new Private Eye series. You should definitely check it out. And he said, I've always been attracted to the Saul Bellow Schmiel humor. And forgive my pronunciation of Yiddish if it's not very good. I mean no offense. I believe that's the kind of anglicized pronunciation. The Schmiel is a kind of idiot who gets involved in these kind of buffoonish adventures, i.e. bad things happen to him, partly because he invites them through his own idiocy. Whereas Augie March, although he might be a little bit of a schmeal, I found him actually kind of, plucky. as in, like, yes, some of these bad things befall him, but he keeps going, he keeps on striving. But there's a great sense of failure hanging over him, because even though he ends the novel in Paris, which is where Bellow lived for many years, when, at the height of his literary fame, he's involved in various shady business dealings, so he's not making his money in an honest way, and his second love um, is trying to make as an actress, and is probably not going to make it. So it seems like there's this sense of failure hanging over them. Is that however you move out of one situation, if you survive it, good, but you move into another one, and there's still this sense of failure hanging over them. And I'm sure, not that I would psychoanalyze Bellow, but I'm sure his biographers have probably led to the same conclusion, that it stemmed from his immigrant upbringing, and stemmed from this great sense of loss that his family had, in that they were once great in the old world, and that they moved to the new world, and in a situation where they'd lost everything. Okay. You know what? It is such a beautiful day that I can't stay indoors, so let's take this episode outdoors. Okay. So, you may be wondering how this influenced James Ellroy. It probably doesn't remind you of the plot of any of Ellroy's novels. It's not exactly LA Quartet material, but it did influence a book he wrote, and that book was called The Confessions of Bugsy Siegel. Okay, that's better. A little bit of sunshine for us. So The Confessions of Bugsy Siegel, to backtrack, Ellroy read The Adventures of Augie March in the early 1970s, just a few years prior to Saul Bellow actually being awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, also won the Pulitzer Prize. And Ellroy, at the time, was homeless. He was living in LA parks. He was abusing a lot of drugs, but he had this ferocious reading habit, which he says in retrospect definitely saved him. It saved him as much as AA saved him in getting him sober, and also saved him in helping him, to live this other life in his mind, which he eventually was able to turn into a reality. So he read this novel. It greatly inspired him. He wanted to be a writer, and there were kind of two ambitions that he had at the time as a writer. Part of him thought that he could either write a crime novel, because of his love of crime fiction, and he thought it was a very interesting, he thought it was a very adaptable formula for him to imitate. And part of him thought that he should be the great American novelist, and he should report on life as he saw it. So when he first got going, Ellroy obviously starts as a crime novelist. He writes two very good crime novels, Brown's Requiem and Clandestine, and they show a sense of him, cutting his teeth in publishing, learning storytelling, learning character and structure. But at the back of his mind, he's like, I want to do far, far better than that. And he starts writing this manuscript called The Confessions of Bugsy Siegel. Now, I've read it. If anybody watching this has read it as well, then you are one of the few and the brave, because the only chance you'll get to read it now is if you go to James Ellroy's archive at the University of South Carolina. And of course you'll need his permission, because he holds the copyright on all of that material. And he's not too keen on people reading his Bugsy Siegel novel. So the story was, Ellroy published his first two novels with Avon. He thought he was really hot stuff, and he was going to make it. He had no idea what it was like for mid-list writers. His early sales were very low. Avon were monitoring this. They weren't confident. And what he should have done is refocused, and there and then thought, how am I going to write a crime bestseller? But being Ellroy and being stupendously ambitious, he's already moved on to his great American novel, Confessions of Bugsy Siegel, inspired by this, The Adventures of Augie March. And the truth is, he only wrote half the manuscript, but the manuscript he did write is in excess of 400 pages. And it paints Bugsy Siegel as in this kind of picaresque character, going from, one bizarre incident to another, rubbing up against the other hoodlums or the other historical figures of the time. And it's interesting that Ellroy would even see Bugsy Siegel in that way. I mean, personally, I think Bugsy Siegel, like any other gangster, is an absolutely abhorrent person. But you know, after Ellroy wrote his unpublished novel, 8 years later, there was the Warren Beatty film Bugsy, which grossly romanticized him and is very historically inaccurate, but actually quite entertaining. I must admit, it's a good movie. If you want a really accurate description, accurate portrayal of Bugsy Siegel, I'd probably say, as a supporting character in Boardwalk Empire, that portrays him pretty accurately, and as a vile human being, which is what he was. So Avon would not touch the Confessions of Bugsy Siegel. They would not touch another novel he'd written at the time called LA Death Trip, which was much more genre-based, but very, very kind of nihilistic and almost hateful, actually, apocalyptic. He wanted to burn down the genre. Again, he's got these grandiose plans, and Ellroy could have gone under there and then. He could have just ruined his writing career. He'd come close. Fortunately, he met Otto Penzler. He got a new agent in Nat Sobel. He struck a deal with the Mysterious Press. They told him, no way with Bugsy Siegel, that the Confessions of Bugsy Siegel, it's unpublishable, it's unreadable. But LA Death Trip can be reworked. That became Blood on the Moon, the first Lloyd Hopkins novel. Ellroy stays in the genre for a few more novels, writes a few more Lloyd Hopkins novels. He continues to learn his craft. His sales pick up, not spectacularly, but they pick up. And then finally, he writes the bestseller that he always needed, and that was The Black Dahlia in 1987. And he becomes a literary celebrity as well. Because he goes on this nationwide book tour, partly financed by himself, and he gets known in all the bookshops, gets known by journalists, gets this reputation as a very consummate performer who's very attuned to a book audience and to giving them a great show. Could almost be an actor or a stand-up comic or something like that. And again, he begins to. It's almost like he's putting on the persona bit by bit, the clothes, the Hawaiian shirts, the lover suits he had, and the demon dog humor. And yeah, that's when he makes it. And The Black Dahlia was the first of his LA Quartet novels, and of course it was the first of his novels where he became really a literary figure. He could have just been a standard genre figure, which, irony of ironies, is what he always wanted and what he kind of wanted from the adventures of Augie March. So, I mean, the good news is Bugsy Siegel, although he kept referring to it occasionally in his correspondence into the mid-80s, he was still occasionally floating the idea that it could be published, but the truth is he gave up on it, and thankfully so. And it's the only kind of novel-length manuscript that he ever gave up on. LA Death Trip was reworked. Other novels didn't get past, say, the outlining stage, but when he starts a novel, he finishes it. He's got that stamina and that will to bring it through. Finally, this novel has one of the most famous opening paragraphs in literature. I'm going to read the opening paragraph, and then I'm going to read the sentence following it, because that's the one that really influenced Ellroy. I'm an American, Chicago born. Chicago, that somber city, and go at things as I've taught myself, freestyle, and will make the record in my own way. First to knock, first admit it, sometimes an innocent knock, sometimes a not so innocent. But a man's character is his fate, says Heraclitus, and in the end there isn't a way to disguise the nature of the knocks by acoustical work on the door or gloving the knuckles. Now here's the line that Ellroy quotes, okay? Everybody knows there is no fineness or accuracy of suppression. If you hold down one thing, you hold down the adjoining. Ellroy was quoting that latter line on the Cold 6000 tour, and he was saying that's what his characters learned in the Cold 6000, his great historical novel. I think it might be his last masterpiece in some ways. His last great historical novel is that his characters learned that. Ward Littell, Pete Bondurant, Kemper Boyd. I think it's kind of an irony because they're trying to control history, but in some ways they're also controlled by it. They're reactive to events just as much as they are shaping them. And in some ways that's what Working March does, is that he's this kind of picaresque schmeal and a bit hapless, but like I say, a bit plucky. I do kind of like him in that he's being bucketed around almost on the lifeboat, almost by the waves, And so the influence of this novel extended long after the Confessions of Bugsy Siegel and Ellroy's aborted attempt to be, the great literary writer before he became the great crime writer. And I would recommend it. And, funnily enough, I think by not being the great literary writer, Ellroy became that great literary writer, if that makes any sense. By staying in the crime genre, he managed to experiment with it and take it out to all sorts of different places. I'd say get yourself a good edition, because this is a Penguin reprint. And I was a bit disappointed. I don't know if you could see that. The print is very, very small, and one of the things I noticed is that there's barely any paragraph breaks at times, and you're reading paragraphs that are entire pages or pages and a half. And just a quick note on the publishing industry today, because I did my English degree 20 years ago, and we just read the canon, we studied the canon, we tried to imitate the canon. Now they don't do that with English degrees. Usually the creative writing degrees, in particular, they tell you what publishers want today, which is very, very different. They don't want stuff that's incredibly difficult to read, that's hard on the eye. They're studying, trends in generational upbringing regarding reading, and it's difficult with, low attention spans and digital distractions. So they want the paragraphs to be chopped and changed. But stay with this book. It is fabulously funny and entertaining and diverting, and it's got this thing where it's high literature. It's the canon, but it doesn't feel like homework. It's a really good fun read. Okay, well, thank you for watching Oral Reads, and I'll be back next time. Now I'm going to go away and enjoy the sunshine. I hope you do too. Bye bye.